People are asking about raised bed. If you go and purchase soil to fill up raised beds, it can be quite expensive. I want to share what I did when I built my greenhouse because it's a lot more economical. When I built my latest greenhouse, it's going on 9 years now, we did what you call the Lasagne Method in the greenhouse. I modified it a little bit because of products I had available. The Lasagne Method, in theory, is supposed to be a self-fertile bed. That means that you're adding nutrients in there. You put cardboard. What does cardboard do? It kills all the grass. We never dug anything out. We just made the bed frames, added cardboard. If I had to do it again, I would put a little bit of bark chips on top of the cardboard to add a water sink, because raised beds tend to dry up. So that's the lesson I learned. Okay. Then we filled where the cardboard was with a whole bunch of weeds. So what we did is we added brown nutrients, which were weeds and stuff that were all dead. We added about 6 inches, and then we added another 6 inches of fresh weeds. It was approximately 20 wheelbarrows of weeds per bed. So that's a 3-foot by 60-foot bed. We had about 20 wheelbarrows full of weeds each bed. Then we went and added seaweed because I live on the shore. In our 20 by 60 greenhouse, we put 4 tons of seaweed. After that, we added composted manure, and that's another 6 inches. So after every step to create more space, it's best that you compact every item you put down. For example, we put the weeds, then we went with our boots and walked all over it to pack it down. The seaweed was fresh, so you didn't need to pack it down because it was wet and icky. We put the manure on, we went with our boots, walked all over it, packed it down. Then we added 2 inches of soil. So we had cardboard, 6 inches of weed, 6 inches of weed.
Fresh one.
Then
Seaweed.
That was about between 4 and 6 inches.
Okay.
Then about
composted
manure, another 6 inches. My boards were only 12 inches. And this is the beauty with the Lasagne Method. You hire worms. The fact that you have all these nutrients in there, they automatically come, so you don't need to add anything. And they, within 12 months, will start mixing all this different layers and make it into one. So what we did is we finished the beds, leveled it off, added about half an inch to an inch of soil on top. When we finished the greenhouse, we planted right away in it. And within 6 months, all the soil was mixed up together. Everything was good. Usually what you do is when you're finishing off the beds, you kind of make it that there's a little bit of a mound in the center.
Yeah.
Because it will settle even though we packed it down. Anyways, and that will get you started. It gives you about fertility for about 10 years. When you plant your vegetables or whatever, you just need to worry about watering for the first year. And then as you harvest and replant, you add a little bit of fertility, like a little bit of worm castings or a little bit of compost on top, and that's it. The beds will settle. Any raised bed will settle. Because of things like the droughts, I would recommend now, 2020 hindsight, that you add 6 inches of wood chips on the bottom. Just because of the cellulose in wood chips, it acts as a water reservoir.
Right. I've read somewhere, each layer, between each layer, they recommend to water it. Do you recommend?
We didn't have time for that.
Right.
When it was finished, we gave it a good water when it was finished. And I wasn't using stuff that was bagged up. I was using what was on our farm. The weeds came from the garden. The dry weeds were a pile that I had piled there. and then the rest of the weeds came from the garden. So basically, most of that summer, all the weeds that came from the garden were put in that greenhouse as a source of fertility. Warning, do not put perennial weeds like barnyard grass or dandelion roots, okay?
So it doesn't work as a usual compost pile.
No, it doesn't work as a usual compost. It ferments, but it's mainly what you're doing is the worms are doing a lot of the work, and you don't get the heat production that a compost does. That summer we actually were sorting out weeds. The perennial weeds were going to the livestock were eating it, and the
best way to kill it.
The best way to kill it is a good digestive system like a compost or livestock.
Right.
So it worked really well, and it's a good economical way, but you have to kind of collect your stuff. Another good item that you can put in your lasagna method is leaves.
That's what I was going to ask. My former boss, he said when you put the leaves in the compost pile, sometimes be careful, it makes the mat.
Yeah, that's correct. See, with the lasagna method, it doesn't matter if it makes a mat because the worms will penetrate through it, no problem.
It's not
so,
bacteria.
but if it's well watered, it will not make a mat.
Oh, okay.
I did these raised beds in a greenhouse situation, so the biological activity was there all winter with the irrigation system. Now, if you do a raised bed in the spring, drive around, find anybody's cleaning up their yard, right? You can also put pieces of wood, but I find big pieces of wood at the bottom of a raised bed will tend to move up. So I would prefer wood chips. Or, for example, if you have a neighbor that has heats with wood, and sometimes, you know, they get the big truckload of wood and then there's the mess at the bottom. The mess at the bottom could go at the bottom of your raised beds. And it will settle, so you will have to add a little bit to it, but at least it'll get you started with a reasonably priced way of doing it, right?
Do you think about the carbon nitrogen ratio as regular compost, or?
No, I usually did 6 inches of this, 6 inches of that. It was kind of an experiment.
Okay.
They do recommend, for example, where the green, like in a compost, you get 6 inches.
Right.
And your green is smaller than your brown, right?
Brown, yes.
I wasn't worried about that because I wanted an extremely rich soil. For the greenhouse, you want the richest, best soil possible. It was 3 years before I started adding nutrients to this, so it worked really well. And yeah, you have to top it up once in a while, but it worked really well. And within 6 months of the beds being set up, you couldn't tell that there was layers.
Do you think the heat of the greenhouse helped to get the process?
The warmer the greenhouse is, the more biological activity you have. If you set up a raised bed in the spring, you have no problems with biological activities. It'll start right away. Another thing, and a lot of people forget, raised beds, because they dry up faster than other type of beds, it's a good idea to mulch them. You can mulch with straw, you can mulch with hay, you can mulch with grass clippings.
Seaweed.
Seaweed, you can mulch. Seaweed, when you use it as a mulch, it tends to slime.
Okay.
So seaweed, I tend to recommend you incorporate it in the bed. But yeah, anything you can find to mulch. When you make raised bed, the big difference between a raised bed and a garden is you have to watch your watering because you can very easily let it dry up too much.
Yeah.
Mind you, raised beds for anybody who is like me, getting up there in age, and that's why when we built the latest greenhouse, just that my raised bed is only 12 inches, but that extra 12 inches that I don't have to bend down saves a lot of backache.
Right.
You don't have to have a raised bed that's 4 feet. A 12-inch raised bed is sufficient to reduce your pressure on your back. And another thing to remember when you're bending down to weed, watch your position. The position you put yourself to weed will help save your back also. So